my goodness, Bagheera is Kipling. So that was although I didn't recognize it, sometimes an actor's intuition is buried and you don't realize what you're mining as a source of energy until perhaps afterwards. But I'm privileged to be the voice of Kipling, a man I greatly admire and loved. And when I was in the Boy Scouts, our troop leader, no, I was in the Cubs actually, which is before the Boy Scouts, our troop leader is called Arkela.
Wow. Well, for me, reading the book as a child really made a difference for me. It allowed me to dream, and it allowed me to dream big, to have courage, to have connection. For me, I always wanted to be Mowgli as a boy because there was a freedom within that, and a freedom to be able to express myself the way I've always wanted to. I found that freedom through being an actor. And then seeing the movie really did something else to my imagination. It allowed me to understand how we create relationships with each other and how those relationships are things that we can really hold on to. Not much that's material can we really hold on to, although we still like the shiny, glossy things. So for me to do this was and you used a beautiful word, surrender. You know, I didn't know what Jon would do in the room, but he is a challenger. And he challenges in a very graceful way for you to do something very different, to have the elements that he saw in you to be able to do this through your vocally, but then allows himself to be courageous enough to ask you questions so that you can play against some of the things that you're used to doing. So for me, in the room and having Jon there with me, he always challenged me to play against things and do things a little bit differently, to have strength and not just to be the loudest person speaking. And which then allowed me to see Raksha, to see Lupita's face, and to create that for myself in front of me when we were having conversations. So I'm honored to be a part of this movie because there's so many different elements that go into making a film of this nature or any film. And I'm just a channel for this particular character that has to bring some love, compassion, yet tough love to this young boy.
And this is my first voiceover role, and I was attracted to it because Raksha is like the eternal mother, and she chooses to take care of this creature who is not one of her own, but as though he was. And I remember I did a session of voiceover really early on, and then a few months later, Jon called me in again, but this time he had Neel's performance captured, and that really grounded the mother-son relationship for me, to see the vulnerability of this boy and the love that he had for the wolf. It only made my love for him grow even more. And it's such a beautiful image to see these two very different creatures have this very real bond.
I really loved all the Disney references and the homages to the original film, but I stayed through the credits and I noticed at the very end it says Fantasound was the sound. Yes. I was wondering if that just a joke that you guys added, or is Disney really calling their sound mixing department Fantasound now?
Fantasound. Fantasound, since it was going to be a concert film, Walt had a vision to put the audience in the middle of the music. And what would be required, and I think they only did it in 2 theaters. I think they did Carthay Circle, I did a theater in New York. They put speakers all around the theater, which cost a tremendous amount of money, even in its day. I think it was $100,000 to outfit a theater. And they had to mic the orchestra using a lot of isolated microphones, I think 30 microphones. I don't know the specifics, I don't remember them, but this was essentially what the concept was. And I remember when I was talking to my sound people and to my composer, John Debney, I said, wouldn't it be cool to explore what Fantasound would be now? Because it only worked in 2 theaters and only for the 1 film. I think it was something he thought you'd use in perpetuity, but it was something that was abandoned rather quickly. And the sound engineer said, well, Atmos sound has that many speakers all around the theater. You use it for sound effects. There's no reason you couldn't use it for music. And so I talked to John Debney about, and he's a Disney guy. He grew up on the Disney lot. He knew Walt. He hung out with the Sherman Brothers when he was a little kid, so he breathes Disney. He knows the culture. And he really leapt at the opportunity. And so when we were miking the orchestra, we isolated instruments when we could. And in the sound mix, Laura Hirschberg, who's our music mixer, we tasked her in the Atmos mix with creating a Fantasound mix. So if you go to see the film, certainly in Atmos, perhaps, I'm not sure in 7.1 how it works, but specifically for Atmos, you will feel that there are instruments that move around the theater, especially isolated instruments like the flute as Mowgli's running. So if you ever see it in a Dolby cinema, you'll experience a version of what we were trying to channel, which was Walt's vision for this. Once again, that is one of dozens of little opportunities we were looking for to somehow tie back into the legacy. There are visual cues in the film that, as time goes on and people get more familiar with it, you'll start to notice bits of Dumbo in there. Looking at the Monstro chase and Pinocchio inspired some of the King Louis stuff. And certainly from Jungle Book, you'll see a lot of shots that are pulled from one film into the next. But to me, that's part of the fun of this. It's really just embracing the opportunity and the emotional connection that we have from growing up with these films and seeing how much of it we could, just knead back into the dough of the film. And Fantasound was one thing I had wanted to do. Just for a moment like this, just to be able to have an excuse to talk about what Walt was going for, and for people who are fans who appreciate that we're trying to fulfill, as they do with the parks, as the parks always change and grow, the movies should too.
But I wanted to know if there was a place that you went or someone you drew from to get that across, that maternal instinct, strong maternal instinct, perhaps your own mother or something like that.
I think my mother had a lot to do with what inspired me. Because, she's my example, and she's a very good mother. I asked myself a lot of questions about what it would be like to lose one of my own, though I'm not a mother myself, but I do love children. When I was 12, I preferred to stay indoors and babysit my cousins than go outside and play. So there's that part of me that is very much alive. I gravitate towards children. So my mother definitely was someone who inspired me.
This question is for the fathers up there. In the movie, Mowgli essentially had 3 father figures that all had very different philosophies on life. One of them was just teaching him to be a leader. One was teaching him to survive individually. And the other one is kind of, exploring his creative side and letting him do what he wants. So personally, how do you guys raise your kids? Which would you more associate towards,
I think if you're blessed with children, I think you have to adapt to each child in each moment. I think you have to be very pragmatic as a parent. I think it's a lot to do with attention and responding to the ever-changing complexities of a child's needs and to address them moment by moment rather than have a set book of rules. That's my 2 cents worth.
Yeah, I'm finding with my 4 daughters that, you first learn as a parent when your child comes out, you want to form them and do all the right things for them. And then you look at them one day and you go, oh, they're already formed. They've got their own deal going. And then that's the moment for me that it clicked in that they're each very, very different.
There is the room for the different style of parenting and storytelling, which is what are the traditions, what are the myths of a culture for? They're to try to help the young generation not have to learn lessons painfully, because you could learn them through visualization and through story. And rule systems are effort out of love, I think, to save the next generation from the pain that the older generation goes through. To explain to them that the stove is hot without them having to touch it. And of course, that's a fantasy. You can't they have to learn on their own as well. But that is part of the strength of a culture, is that you can help at least give them a context, contextualize their struggles so that as they persevere and come out the other end, they understand what it means and it gives it purpose.